Welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for December 6th, 2022. If we could call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brennan? Here. Councilmember Lehman? Here. Councilmember Whiting?
Here.
Councilmember Contreras?
Here.
Mayor Mars?
Here, thank you very much. Now, if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Moving ahead then to item 3A, which is a special presentation of our Show Off Shakopee winners. Amanda.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and a pretty big crowd tonight. So every year we have the Show Off Shakopee photo contest. We had quite a few entries this year, and it was a tough decision, but our overall winner is Justin Braun with Sparklers Over Shakopee. Justin, if you want to come on up. And they all get a framed version of it. Our Hometown Pride winner is Caitlin Schertz. She unfortunately could not be here, so instead we have Lauren Olstad, who is actually the person featured in the photo. Our next category is nostalgia, which was difficult to capture, but Robert Aldridge got it with Time and Again. And last but not least, we've seen this face before. Our Great Outdoors winner is Prehistoric by Christopher Straub. If Mayor and Council could come down and we'll have everybody go in front of the dais for a photo, that would be lovely. And congratulations again to all the winners. Okay, let's get you centered. Maybe 2 winners on that side and 2 winners on that side. And then Mayor and Council disperse them on that. Mayor, right in the middle?
Congratulations. It's awesome work that you do. Very inspiring for our community.
Okay, if we could squish together just a smidge and hold up your photos, definitely, please. Okay, ready? Cheese. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Oh, we have a couple more.
Now, you can't submit those for next year's contest.
Thank you all to everybody that participated and the winners. It certainly brings out the best in Shakopee, and we've been doing this for many years, and very appreciative, and it's a lot of fun. Thank you. Counselor?
I think they post the photos along the hallway here for next year in case the public want to come and see those photos. So,
Right.
welcome.
All right. Moving ahead then to item number 4, approval agenda. Is there any changes, corrections, Mr. Reynolds?
No, sir.
Counselor Brennan?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving ahead to item number 5, consent business. Any changes, Mr. Reynolds?
Nothing from staff, sir.
Thank you very much. Counselor Whiting?
Make a motion to approve the consent business as presented.
Counselor Lehman.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda, which is deemed normal ongoing business for the city. We wouldn't have any discussion, but before we vote, we will read the consent agenda into the public record. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. These are the consent agenda items for 6 December of 2022. 5A1 approves the city council meeting minutes for 15 November and 16 November of 2022. 5A2 approves the contract renewal with Lockridge, Grindle, and Nowen for lobbying services. 5A3 approves on-sale and Sunday liquor licenses for Hatang LLC, doing business as Sapporo. 5B1 authorizes the purchase of a self-contained breathing apparatus equipment from McQueen Equipment for $58,000. 5C1 adopts Resolution R 2022 TAC 151, setting a public hearing date for a vacation of public right-of-way as dedicated within Glacier Estates. 5C2 adopts Resolution number R 2022 TAC 152, setting a public hearing date for a vacation of a portion of a drainage and utility easement for 7006 Oak Ridge Court. 5D1 declares a list of property as surplus and authorizes its disposal. 5E1 adopts Resolution number R 2022 TAC 140, authorizing the city to submit a Minnesota State Active Transportation Infrastructure Program grant for Stagecoach Trail. 5E2 accepts MnDOT's speed limit authorization report and authorizes posting of a recommended 40-mile-per-hour speed zone limit for 12th Avenue between CAAH 83 and Valley Park Drive. And 5E3 approves the installation of a yield sign at the intersection of Legion Street and Prairie Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, which is deemed routine business. The consent agenda has been read into the public record. There would be no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. The consent agenda has been approved. Moving ahead to item number 6, now I'd like to call on any resident citizen that would like to come forward and make comment on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome on an item not on the agenda. Have we received any electronic communication, Mr. Reynolds?
No, sir, we have not.
All right. Seeing none, then we would move ahead to item number 7, which was business removed from consent, and there was none. And then moving ahead then to a public hearing, 8A, on the 2023 budget and property tax levy meeting. Councilor Lehman.
Motion to open a public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. Further discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes, and staff will present. Nate, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Nate Reinhardt, Finance Director for the City of Shakopee. Tonight we have our public meeting on the 2023 recommended budget and property tax levy. One slide here just to acknowledge some changes from a preliminary budget. Assessment data from the county is always a moving target. We've updated that for the most recent market value data, which was relatively minor changes. Then in September, we also talked about still fine-tuning a few of the numbers as we went along. Really, we had 3 placeholders at the time, one being about $112,000, which would be available for additional expenditure allocations to the departments. Ultimately, we allocated only $78,000 of this number. Health insurance, which we reduced considerably before the preliminary budget, but we held about $24,000 in anticipation of our dental insurance increasing. Our current provider had provided us a 30% rate increase. Since then, we worked with our insurance agent, went through an RFP process, ultimately selected a different provider that lowered our rates. And then the third one, we hired a consultant to complete a comparison and class study for full-time non-union employees. The goal was to ensure we remain market competitive with our wages, ideally the middle of our peer comparison cities. Ultimately, what we incorporated in our budget was pay grade revisions to 11 positions and a 2% market adjustment based on the results of that study. That amounted to $276,000, which compares to the $320,000 placeholder we had. So the net reductions to the general fund were about $124,000, which we used to offset the planned use of prior year earned building permit revenues that were used to balance the budget. The city annually adopts a budget and property tax levy for the upcoming year. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide the public with information on the city's 2023 proposed budget and 2023 proposed property tax levy, and it allows the general public a chance to comment on that proposed budget and property tax levy prior to them being adopted. I did put a pie chart on here that shows the breakdown of property taxes based on the preliminary levies for homeowners in Shakopee. The portion we're discussing tonight is the city portion, which represents about 26.3% of property taxes paid. There were several steps city staff and city council have taken to get us up to this point, including meetings on the city's long-term financial plan, capital improvement plan, and budget. The city also hosted a budget listening session open to the public at the beginning of the process for input. The preliminary levy was adopted on September 6th, and then per state statute, the final levy, which is being discussed tonight, cannot be any greater. It can only be reduced from the preliminary levy. Our 2023 proposed budget was developed based on overlying financial objectives from both the city council and administration. We do believe the budget being presented tonight meets the city council and administration objectives, which include continuing to be one of the lowest tax communities in the metro, continuing to grow our tax capacity of existing and new property, and then achieve the city council adopted strategic priorities. We will continue to be transparent and make decisions with the future in mind to ensure the city's ongoing ability to provide quality services at a reasonable price. As we've gone through the budget process, we've updated our budget page on the website with all past presentations. We will also provide this presentation and a copy of the draft budget on the website as well for those that want to just see more detail. And then also, for those who aren't aware, we do have a property tax payer receipt tool, which basically allows a homeowner to go in, put their property values in, and see, actually get a unofficial itemized receipt of what they pay for city services. That's all based on 2022, but once everything's adopted and we get our final tax rates, we'll update for 2023. Shakopee continues to remain strong financially. A big part of that strength is the use of our internal service funds for equipment, buildings, park, and technology that allows us to effectively fund the replacement of these items through level annual amounts. Despite being in good financial position, financially there are a number of drivers not necessarily unique to the city of Shakopee that do have an impact on our current and future budgets. Big factor being inflation over the past year, with increases in the CPI from June of last year to June of this year when we started the budget process of 9.1%, which impacts several areas of our operating costs. Personnel accounts for about 70% of city operational costs. Again, not unique to Shakopee, but local governments are experiencing staffing challenges in many areas, including police officers, firefighters, and part-time positions, which is impacting market rates, and we're also seeing workers' compensation increases as well. As Shakopee's population development grows, the demand for city services will also grow. As an example, over the past 5 years, we've added 14.1 miles of street, 23 miles of sidewalk trails, 75 acres of parks and open space, increasing the demand for things like snow removal, street maintenance, landscaping, and additional funds needed for future replacement costs. And then we are seeing property tax shifts in Shakopee and statewide. Cities statewide are also seeing it as a result of significant increase in residential market value in comparison to other property types. As you're aware, we've seen significant growth in market value over the past year. For taxes payable 2023, that taxable market value is $7.2 billion, which is an increase of $1.2 billion or 19.4% from last year. New construction accounts for $127 million, or about 11% of this increase. Residential and apartment market value grew at the fastest rates. Residential value grew by $977 million, or 26.5%, which included $65 million of new growth. On the opposite side, we did see smaller increases in commercial and industrial market values. The gross tax capacity is adjusted for the fiscal disparities program, which is unique to the 7-county metro area of Minnesota. 40% of commercial and industrial growth since 1971 gets contributed to a pool, and in turn we receive a distribution based on population and market value of all property per person compared to the average market value per person in the metro area. We are one of the largest net contributors to the program. In 2022, we were the 10th out of 179 communities. This chart shows the fiscal disparities in terms of tax capacity. With the growing industrial and commercial base we've seen here, it's gone from 1.4 million to 6.2 million in 2023. So to put that in context, it's about 7% of additional tax capacity that we're contributing to the program. The city levies a flat dollar amount for taxes, which is spread against all taxable properties in proportion to their percentage of total tax capacity. Residential represents 51.2% of the city's tax capacity. This comparison of this chart to last year shows that residential properties will make up about 4.3% more of total tax capacity in 2023. So this chart is in percentages, but if you want to think of it in dollar terms, it works approximately out the same way. So for every dollar the city requests in our levy, for 2022, residential properties paid about 47 cents of every dollar, and in 2023, it's about 51 cents of every dollar. So prior to getting into city budget numbers, I wanted to illustrate that property tax shift as a result of residential values increasing faster than commercial and industrial and other property types. So I used the change in taxable market value of the median value home and median value of other property types, and then increased them by the growth of existing values for that property type. So prior to even adding a dime to the city budget, the median value home would still see a property tax increase of about $27. Whereas apartments would see about a 4% decrease, commercial a 15% decrease, and industrial 11% decrease. So that's with no change in the levy at all. So we are recommending a levy of $23,892,000, which is an increase of $1.4 million or 6.25% from last year. And then the preliminary EDA levy of $500,000, which is flat from the previous year. We are continuing to propose our $700,000 capital improvement levy. And then the abatement levy will increase with the first abatement payment to Cherney Industries. Debt service levy for 2022 will increase with, for 2023 will increase with the 2022A improvement bond that we issued this year. Scheduled to levy $348,000. However, we're utilizing $200,000 of fund balance from the local projects fund balance to phase in that increase over a 2-year period. And then to put things into context, when we talk about a 1% increase, decrease to the levy, it amounts to about $225,000 in funding. So here's the summary of the 2023 proposed general fund budget, which the budget incorporates the general fund portion of the property tax levy. So in the past few years, we've seen a lot of building permit volume. With larger projects, we may see revenues collected in the prior year, but not incur inspection costs for that project in the following year. The budget utilizes about $126,000 of those committed revenues for the 2023 budget, which is a reduction of about $124,000 that we used in 2022. Public safety continues to be our largest operating expense, representing about 46% of our operating budget. Getting into budget details, overall the city is anticipating a net increase in non-property tax revenue of a little over $1 million. This would include budgeted increases in the contribution from the Shakopee Public Utilities, building permit revenues, municipal state aid for streets, investment income, and police contracted services. A rental housing program is anticipated to be implemented at the beginning of 2023. The city has budgeted $150,000 in revenue related to that program, which will offset the cost of that program. And then on the expenditure side, we're budgeting a forecast increase of $2.2 million. Like most other cities, operational costs are being primarily driven by personnel. Of the $2.3 million increase, $1.6 million is related to personnel. The city does have 3 unions. All 3 union contracts have been settled through the end of 2023. Those contracts included a cost of living adjustment of 2.5%, which we've also provided to non-union employees. That amounts to about $537,000 in total. During 2022, the City Council approved changes to the part-time pay plan as a result of an independent consultant review. Those changes have been included in the 2023 budget and amounts to about $140,000. We're utilizing that same consultant to complete a full-time employee compensation and classification review, which is also on your agenda tonight. That adjustments would continue to align our pay ranges with the midpoint of our 10 peer comparison cities, which is consistent with previous city council goals. As I mentioned, initial placeholder of 320,000 was included, but that has been reduced to 262,000. For health insurance and dental insurance, again, working with our insurance agent, we did RFPs for both those insurance rates. Overall, great news. When it came to insurance, we've actually saw a small decrease in dental and pretty much no increase in health insurance. And then workers' comp, we've anticipated increases there. We haven't got our workers' comp rates for 2023, but we are anticipating increases there. And then when hired employees are placed at the wage scale based on their experience levels, they advance to the next step on their wage scale on their anniversary dates. Those step increases amount to about $155,000. The city is proposing the following full-time staff positions. Full-time parks maintenance operator position at a total cost of about $94,000. This position would ensure an appropriate level of staffing for the city's growing open space, parks, and streetscaping. Full-time rental inspector at a cost of $108,000. This position would be responsible implementing the new rental housing ordinance and inspection procedures. The position would be funded through revenues related to that program. And then 3 fire department supervisors positions to be implemented at mid-year with a net cost of $50,000. The 3 full-time shift supervisors will work rotating 24-hour shifts. The cost of these positions would be netted with some savings in switching to the 24-hour shifts, and then changes to the use of on-call firefighters. And then lastly, 2023 is not an election year, so we'll see some savings there. However, we will have a special election now. The other expenditures, so again, we utilize internal service funds to accumulate funds in advance to purchase the replacement of city equipment and vehicles and park infrastructure. The funding source is annual rent, so internal charges to appropriate funds. There will be increases to these next year as we've added playground equipment, and some of the costs have been increasing over time. Net increase of $96,300. The net change for all other expenditures, excluding personnel and these and the rent charges, is $577,000. The breakdown is on the slide, but added software for the rental housing program, new election poll pad and tabulator upgrades, and then in general, we're just seeing across the board increases provided in some of the services we do, which include fuel increases, utility increases, and then our increase in the share of county prosecution costs and miscellaneous material and contractual service increases. The debt service levy will be required to increase as a result of the 2022 general obligation improvement bond issued this year. These bonds were used to fund current year and 2023 projects identified in the capital improvement plan. The required debt service levy repayment is $347,000. However, we have reduced it through the use of $200,000 of fund balance from the local projects fund. The only other levy-funded debt issue is our 2016 abatement bond levy, which was used to fund the community center and ice arena construction. This chart compares the city's tax capacity and tax rate over the past 10 years, including the 2023 preliminary levy. Based on assessment value data, the proposed tax levy will decrease the city's tax rate from 32.11% to 28.53%, so a decrease of almost 3.6%. So even with the proposed increase in the levy, we will see a significant drop in the city's tax rate. For the median value home, that value increased from $284,700 to $346,500 over the past year. This is an increase of about $61,800 or 21.7%. This chart provides information on that median value home and the city property tax paid since 2017. For that median value home that increased by $61,800, it equates to about a $95 or 10.8% increase in property taxes. Absent any change in value, homeowners could expect a tax decrease of $98 or 11.1%. And then for reference, when we talk about the 1% levy increase, decrease, it amounts to about $10 on the median value home. Here's a comparison of three different values, three different value homes, and taking in consideration the value changes as well. A home valued in the 25% quartile, and shows a home valued in the 75% quartile. Again, this considers the market value change. A 270,000 home could expect about a $73 increase. 443,000 home could expect about a $112 increase. So I did provide a chart at the start of this presentation without any impact from the levy. So this is now taking into consideration the 6.25% levy. If you are a commercial industrial property owner, you are likely to see a property tax decrease. And then this slide provides the preliminary levies over 10 most comparable cities. City of Shakopee being on the bottom of the 10 comparable cities. Statewide average, so across all Minnesota, is 9.1%. So we're quite a bit below the average with our current preliminary levy. Just one slide here to talk about utilities. So we operate sanitary sewer and stormwater utilities. The operations and capital needs of these utilities are all funded through user charges. Currently reflected in our budget is an increase in the city's usage rate of 0.88 cents to 91 cents per 1,000 gallons, and a change to the city's fixed rate of $3 to $3.20, and a change in the Met Council rate of $2.80 to $2.82 per 1,000 gallons. And then on the stormwater charge, increase of about 5 cents per month. So a lot of numbers there, but for a typical user of 5,000 gallons a month, they could expect a $6 annual increase in their bill. And Shakopee, this is a comparison of our cost of services. So this would be property taxes along with those two utilities I mentioned, storm and sewer. The following chart provides the 2022 annual cost of a 250,000 value home, which is slightly below the median value home in Shakopee. In 5,000, and with 5,000 gallons of water usage a month. So our total city cost services compare pretty favorably with our peer comparison cities. You probably noticed an additional summary report in a property tax preliminary statement that was mailed by the county. This was required as part of a state law change. Information just provides a percent change from the previous year. And then slide here, just wanted to mention there are a few refund programs for property taxes that are administered by the state of Minnesota. The more common one being the regular and the special property tax refunds. Those are the two most common ones. The special refund does not have an income limitation, so residents may want to explore either of these two options with the State Department of Revenue's website, see if they qualify. Just a calendar here for reference, and then just wanted to highlight some of the positives, including the 20% growth of the city's taxable market value, 10% from new growth, and significant appreciation of residential values. We will see a substantial, about 11% decrease in our tax rate from last year. Decreases in property taxes for commercial and industrial properties. Continued investment in public safety, including the additional 3 full-time fire supervisors and the implementation of the rental housing program. And then continued investment in parks and trails, including full-time park maintenance operator position. And then, not in operations, but in the CIP, we've also identified $6.8 million in park development and replacement, so significant investment in parks. So in the next step, so this is a public meeting. Public is welcome to speak on the budget and or property tax levy. After tonight's meeting, the budget will come back to City Council on December 20th for final approval. So no action is required tonight, except to invite the public to speak.
Thanks, Nate. Questions of staff? Councilor Lehman?
One question, Mayor. The 2023 annual budget general fund summary that you had. Sorry to make you
No, it's
back, but. Yep. So the payment in lieu of tax, payment in lieu of taxes from the utility, where does that show up on here?
That's a good question. I think it's in the charges for services. I apologize for not knowing that off the top of my head, but.
I was thinking either intergovernmental or charges for services, so if you could just shoot us an email and let us know which line item that would be.
I'll look it up super quick.
Appreciate it.
That'd be for the utility.
The payment in lieu of
Yeah,
tax, yeah.
yeah. Other questions? I just had a question I got an email from a resident that, I think I know the answer to this. The tax rate in the city has been reduced since we're collecting more from a much larger evaluation pool. And you said our taxable market value is grown to 7 billion or something, and then our tax rate has gone down to about 28%, right?
Yep, so, yeah, anytime you have your tax rate decrease, it's because your market value is growing. Correct.
Okay.
Which
Yep, I wanted
ultimately
to ask that
reduces
question.
the rate for everybody.
Mayor, if we could just expand on that just a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what's happening is that residential base is growing in value faster than the commercial industrial base's value. Not because there's not enough being built, but because the ones that are here just didn't go up in value because the supply and demand or whatever for the commercial industrial properties is not going up as fast as residential.
Yep, and that was the hope of what I tried to illustrate with that property tax shift is if you're levying a flat dollar amount, you know, whatever it is, let's just say $1, and it goes back to the capacity slide too, where I talked about the 51 cents, it's because the residential share is getting bigger because their market value is growing at a faster rate than commercial and industrial, which is then picking up more of what we're already levying for taxes, if that makes sense.
Okay, more questions, comments of staff? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. If any resident citizen that would like to come forward and make comment on our levy, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome.
There's one general comment. So it's the charges for services is where that amount is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening and welcome.
Name's Matt Clare, address 134 Arabian Avenue East. My question is, if there's more property going up that's paying into taxes, why is the amount of tax going up? I understand there's more miles of road to be plowed and sidewalks and such, but if they're paying more in taxes and there's plenty of apartment buildings and houses going up, just wondering why my dollar amount's going up if there's more people paying into the pool. I just don't quite understand that.
Nate?
To an extent, it will obviously reduce the overall levy. I mean, I think what's happening with a lot of the residential properties is they're growing at a pretty fast clip in comparison to some of the other values. So again, they're picking up some from commercial and industrial. And I don't have the figure with me, but I'm going to ballpark it. I mean, I think it was our levy, if I can find that slide. I think it's up to about $1 million we could have increased the levy before it would have really had any change because of the market value growth. So anything above that then would be absorbed by current property payers.
Councilor Whiting?
And just to state, the county sets the market value of the properties, the city doesn't. And
I realize that.
My property got hit hard this time too, so I'm feeling with you too. So
Right.
I think it's the demand and the values, and those ebb and flow too. So.
Right. My question is, if there's before 10 people paying in, but to a system now there's 15, shouldn't the amount paid go down because more people paying in? I guess just where the question is. And also in the county is so much bigger, but their per dollar amount of my taxes is smaller than the city. So the city, which is smaller, why are the dollar amount increasing compared to the county, which has more, which is bigger and has more people and roads maintained and things like that?
Mayor?
Councilor Lehman?
I'm going to take a shot at this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you took a commercial building and a single-family home, and the single-family home went up 26%, and the commercial building went up 2%, and then you take the value of the commercial building and the value of the residential home, and you apply the the tax rate, find out what they would actually be paying on their property taxes. The problem is that these properties aren't going up as fast in value as these properties.
Right.
So these properties over here are getting hit, and if you kind of want to say it this way, are carrying these over here.
Right.
But in fairness, in the past, these values were really high when these were really low, and these were carrying these for a while, so now the role is reversed.
Okay.
Okay?
It has
And
been that
we can't control that, the market forces do that.
Right.
We're starting to see that shift starting to change again, because now we're seeing housing values coming down, because now the interest rates are higher, it's a little harder to get a mortgage on it, or it cost more. We saw the commercial go down because, you know, during the COVID and stuff like that, there just wasn't a whole lot of consumers out there really pumping up the need for some of these businesses that were forced to be closed. So hopefully that turns back around in the next couple of years and equalizes it somewhat, with the residential coming back down a little bit and commercial coming back up a little bit.
Good. Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's something that we touched on that's also an issue, and a lot of people don't understand because it's very difficult to understand, and that's the concept of the Fiscal Disparities Program, where quite literally, only in the state of Minnesota, nowhere else in the United States, does the state take part of our industrial capacity monies, $7 million this year, ballpark, and that then goes into a pool that they give to other cities. We get zero, and they take $7 million of our dollars. They take $7 million of your tax dollars that you would have paid into the city, goes to support other cities.
Okay.
And I could talk about fiscal disparities for a while, but
We don't have all night.
yeah.
And there again, the theory at the beginning made sense, but it got all convoluted over the years since the 70s. It was originally intended to take from growing metro areas to help, you know, let's say if you got town B up north somewhere that needs the highway from there to Minneapolis worked on, or whatever, they don't have the resources to do that because they're a town of 300 people. So the theory was they would take just a little bit from all of these that are really growing to help the state and the feds do these projects, to connect them and help them expand. But now I think the largest portion goes to some of the largest population centers, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and stuff like that.
And also some wealthy communities that we know.
Exactly. So, you know, at some point, I think I had a conversation with Mr. Reynolds about this previously, that I'd like to see a connection made between those that receive local government aid and pay, and who pays fiscal disparities, because we're actually getting hit twice.
Yeah, right.
Not only do we pay the fiscal disparities, but we do not receive any local government aid. There's other cities that receive the local government aid and receive the fiscal disparities. So from a state legislative standpoint, I'm going to work pretty hard on fighting that and making that connection, because it's just a double whammy for you and the rest of the citizens of Shakopee. It's just not fair. So.
Yeah, and I'm very familiar with a community in southern Minnesota that almost 50% of its budget is paid for by the state. We get zero.
Councilor Whiting.
Just my last comment is, Mr. Reinhardt had a good example in his presentation of the costs that have gone up, including our union wages and cost of living and things like that. So thank you for that presentation, by the way. It was very detailed. But thank you, too.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Would any other resident citizen like to come forward and make comment? This is a public hearing. Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, I have a question. Do we continue this public hearing or close this public hearing?
Yeah, I don't actually believe this was notified as a public hearing. The statute doesn't require a public hearing anymore, it just requires a public meeting. So I don't think it was notified as a public hearing, was it?
No, the notification would be the preliminary property tax statement that was sent out with the date.
Didn't hurt to open it, I would close it.
So a motion to close, I'll make a motion to close public hearing.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Further discussion? I know we're not taking action tonight, but our proposed levy at 6.25% and it affects all of us. Our home values are going up. I think in the last 6 or 7 years, your house has gone up about 60+%, and your taxes have gone up about 30. Your house is going up faster than the taxation, but for 2023, our levy is the lowest compared to all of our comp cities, which you saw a chart on. It's much lower than the current state average. The state has done a poll of average cities are raising their levy 9.1% on preliminary levies. We also, Shakopee, as the economic engine of Scott County, we have the lowest levy increase in all of Scott County, and actually lower than Scott County and some other cities, Chaska, Prior Lake, Chanhassen, and Jordan. So just thought I'd throw that out. Pretty fiscally conservative here in Shakopee. But I have a motion to close the public hearing in a second. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. There is no action required. We'll go on from there. Item number 9. Now I'd offer a motion, or would accept a motion to recess for our EDA meeting. Councilor Contreras.
I'd like to make a motion to recess to our EDA meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to recess to EDA. Further discussion? 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 All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, that motion passes. We stand in recess. Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I call to order the December 6, 2022 Economic Development Authority meeting. If staff can please note the roll. Item number 2 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Mr. Lehman?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion and a second by Mars to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Number 3 on the agenda is the consent business, and on the consent business is the EDA minutes. Ms. Contreras?
Motion to approve consent business.
There's been a motion and a second by Mars. Are there any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Number 4A on the agenda is the 2023 EDA Special Benefit Levy and Budget. And Mr. Reinhardt is presenting.
Good evening, President and Commissioners. Tonight, we're asking for EDA consideration of the proposed 2023 EDA tax levy. Similar to the city levy, the maximum levy for the EDA for 2023 was set in September, so the final levy may only be reduced. It cannot be increased. We are asking for approval at the EDA level tonight, and that'll be forwarded on to for City Council approval on December 20th. The EDA levy is subject to a limit per state statute of 0.185% of the city's estimated market value. The EDA levy cap for 2023 is $1,118,000. So the levy being proposed tonight is far under this cap. The EDA levy differs slightly from the general fund levy in that it gets applied to all taxable properties within the city, including properties that are currently part of a tax abatement or TIF plan. The EDA levy is also identified separately on the property tax statements as a separate local tax outside of the city's general property tax. The EDA levy is specifically designated for economic development activities, and any funds unspent from year to year will remain within this fund for that purpose. The EDA has acquired the master lease for the River City Center. Currently, EDA owns the land and the CDA owns the building. The EDA is responsible for the business tenants on the main level, and the CDA continues to manage the senior housing apartments on the second level. The activity, which would be the lease revenue and expenditures, will be accounted for in a separate fund of the EDA, which you'll see on an upcoming slide. Staff is not recommending any change in the EDA levy, which is currently $500,000. Additional funding is provided through the contribution of 0.5% of revenues from the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission. The 2023 budget anticipates that contribution to be $286,000. The expenditure side is made up of primary personnel and professional services, which include 100% of the economic development coordinator and 50% of the planning and development director. $91,000 for continued entrepreneurship programming, $33,000 for Main Street, $70,000 for facade loans, and then $67,000 for other professional consultants that may be used during the year. For the median value home, who's increased by $61,800, the annual property taxes in 2023 would be about $23, which is $1 more than that median value home paid in 2022. As mentioned earlier, the EDA took over as the master tenant for the first floor commercial space of the River City Center earlier this year. We are accounting for the activity in a separate fund and put together a separate budget for the River City Center. We did not include the agreements the EDA recently entered into with an architect and a construction management service, as we wanted to show just the operational budget. We'd likely capitalize those agreements with the building improvements if that project were to move forward. We have budgeted $395,000 in lease revenues and $198,000 in expenses for a net operating income of $197,000. I think the next year will allow us to kind of fine tune some of these numbers as we get more experience. Also moving forward, we might want to consider allocating a portion of staff costs that are associated with managing the property and collecting on these leases. I can answer any questions that you may have. Otherwise, I ask for consideration of the resolutions adopting the proposed 2023 EDA levy and budget.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Mr. Reinhardt?
Madam President, you just had a chart there, the one about the budget right here. The EDA levy from 2022, you said there was no change. It was $500,000 last year.
That is a typo. That was $500,000 last year.
Not
I'm
a
sorry.
problem. I just wanted to make sure that was.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? How would the council like to proceed with this?
Nate, is this two or one resolutions? Because there's two numbers, or is it all just together?
Two separate resolutions.
Okay.
One would be approving the levy. One would be approving the levy, and then one would be approving the budget.
Okay, so the first one would be for the levy, just to make sure, right? The number, okay. So I'll take a shot at the first one. Adopt resolution number E 2022-013, approving the 2023 EDA special benefit levy of $500,000. Correct?
There's been a motion and a second to approve the 2023 EDA special benefit levy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. There is a second, Mr. Mars.
Madam President, I'll offer Resolution E 2022-014, approving the EDA budget for 2023.
There's been a motion
Second.
and a second by Contreras. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the adoption of the Chamber of Commerce contract for 2023. Mr. Kursky.
President and board members, so on an annual basis, we revisit this contract. So this will be the contract for 2023 for Main Street. The only change this year is currently the chamber has a billboard on the highway that we would actually take over. So they would still get their $25,000, and then they currently collect $7,800 in revenue for that billboard, which now would advertise economic development and city events.
Okay. Where is that billboard located?
It's actually, Madam President, board members, it's not on their property, and there's a long history that I don't want to go into and how it ended up there, but it's just before, I believe, Blue Lake sewage treatment plant.
Okay.
Just west of the 101 Stagecoach interchange.
Correct. Yeah.
On the north side of 101.
Mr. Whiting?
Thank you, Madam President. It's my understanding that the EDA would be managing the billboard for our own purposes.
That's correct. It had been with Badger Hill for many years, and then O'Brien's had it for 1 year. Currently, it's with a mortgage company, and as Mr. Lehman pointed out, mortgages aren't doing very well, so they don't have a user for 2023. And so when I met with the chamber staff, I said, it's pretty visible, and right now it basically is the same ad for a year. I said, wouldn't it make more sense to have it at least change over a couple times a year and really promote the community and things going on in the city, and they agreed.
Just to follow up, would you use in-house design services?
Yes.
And somebody who would print that for us? Okay.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Mr. Kursky? Mr. Mars?
Madam Chair, I'll offer a contract with the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce for 2023 for the amount of $32,800, including total access to the existing billboard.
It's been a motion. Is there a second? By Contreras. Is there any further questions, Mr. Mars?
Madam Chair, we don't have any billboards in our community. We have one, and that's been grandfathered in, but that, finally be able to be part of the control of the message, nothing against any business that promotes themselves on the board, they pay for that. But for the city, it's a real entranceway to our community, 101, and to be able to have a major part in controlling the message and how we promote our community, I think it's outstanding, and for just a few dollars of consideration in that, I think that's great.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more comments? Any others? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is the EDA bill list. If anybody has questions regarding the bill list. I noticed that there's some inclusion of the River City Center bills are now listed on there. So I don't know if you've all noticed that. Item number 6 on the agenda is adjournment to Tuesday.
Madam Chair, I'll offer a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023 at 7 p.m.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to adjourn. Yes?
Discussion?
Discussion?
Before we adjourn this last EDA meeting for 2022, I just want to give a special thank you to Councilor Brennan for the last year of being president of the EDA meeting and doing a great job. And as this would be your last meeting presiding over the EDA, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to thank me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion adjourns to Tuesday, January 3rd. And that concludes that meeting. Back to the city council.
From here?
I can do it for you from
Okay,
here.
great.
I don't think it'll work.
We will reconvene this City of Shakopee City Council meeting for December 6, 2022. We've just completed our EDA portion of our meeting, and we're moving ahead, and we're on 11A1, which is THC licensing, and Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I wanted to state, first of all, that although it says that the action requested is to adopt the ordinance and the resolution, ultimately, what we're really trying to do this meeting is if you have any changes or anything that you want staff to work on to have us do, and then, of course, then we can bring it back on the 20th. So if, it does not need to be passed today. We have until the 31st, which means that we have until the 20th. So if there are things that you would like us to research or do otherwise, please don't hesitate to let us know, even though it says adopt. All right. Well, I thought the best thing to do was to start with the current state of the law and THC edible products in Minnesota. And this quote comes from an NPR article that I had sent to all of you earlier, and it's really striking when the director of medical cannabis for the Minnesota Department of Health says the following: "We have essentially created an adult use market with no licensing, less stringent testing, and high public risk due to the lack of compliance and enforcement capacity. It is really not known what is in these products and whether or not they are safe. So, as you know at this point, on July 1st of 2022, Minnesota made these products legal. From my opinion, as being a former staffer in the United States Senate, I can tell you as a staffer, we were always concerned about the implications of our statutes, what was it that we were enacting, and what were the unknown implications. This is a textbook case of passing a law without fully thinking through the consequences. And the state is currently scrambling to address this in the next session. And I fully expect, based upon what we've been hearing, is that the state will simply bypass a fix on edibles and will be seeking to make all cannabis products legal from a recreation standpoint. So that doesn't necessarily solve our issue, but the benefit of that is that obviously when that is passed, there will be standards, there will be enforcement, there will be compliance, there will be state regulation, because frankly the state's been working on that for years. On the 16th of August, as a reminder, you imposed a moratorium on the sale of THC products until December 31st, and you requested us to take a look at the current tobacco licensing as an option for THC. The other thing that was requested was to look at a municipal concept, which I personally loved, and I think that would have been a remarkable thing to do, but and I was asking around with others and what they thought, and nobody was willing to move forward with that, and we simply didn't have time to do that. We did look at the current tobacco license and essentially have not merged. We've stolen the tobacco language, plagiarized the tobacco language, and we've brought that into our THC ordinance. Much like tobacco, it's a revocable yearly license. It does require the holder to hold a tobacco license, and the reason for that is multifaceted. Probably the biggest reason is that if you restrict it to the same facilities that have tobacco licenses, we do not have to then worry about zoning issues or any other issues. Those things are already taken care of. We already know where they're going to be, and so that takes that whole issue off the table. And the other piece is that when you get a tobacco license, you already have to have a background investigation, and so it molds right into it. And the other piece, obviously, that there has to be training for staff when it comes to compliance. All right, so let's get into the proposed ordinance. First of all, there are multiple reasons that we can deny a license, and that includes if the applicant is under 21, has a conviction or license revocation in the last 5 years for any THC product, fails to provide complete and accurate information on their application, owes funds to the state governmental agencies, is prohibited by law, has failed a compliance check or inspection, or has violated other THC laws, including city-imposed moratorium in the last 5 years. Everything except for the last portion, obviously, pretty much mirrors our tobacco license. It does prohibit things that currently are not prohibited by the state. Sales to those under 21, sales through vending machines, sales through mobile or non-permanent structures, possession by those under 21, currently not illegal in Minnesota. Attempts to purchase by those under 21, use of false identification during the process, and providing samples of THC products. The ordinance does require licensed premises to be available for inspection by our compliance teams, and requires acknowledgement that the city will have a compliance check at least yearly, and also provides a process which also mirrors our tobacco legislation when it comes to particular violations. So that is the general overview. The last thing is the budget impact. It's very minimal. It mirrors, again, the fee that we have for our tobacco license. Again, there would not be a need, and that's $200, by the way. And there is no need for any additional background check fee because we're basically, once again, piggybacking on the tobacco license. That is essentially it in a nutshell. It very much mirrors our tobacco license. I believe that this will be in effect for maybe 6 months before the state ultimately determines what they're going to do. So I open it up for your suggestions, comments, thoughts, and anything else you would like us to take a look at if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Questions of staff? Counselor Whiting?
Mr. Mayor, could you click back to the slide? Sorry, Mr. Gursky. Take your time. On compliance checks, so the 5-year compliance. So it says here violated other THC's laws, including the city imposed moratorium in the last 5 years. So conviction of license revocation in the last 5 years for any didn't we talk about if there was going to be tobacco compliance in the last 5 years would also not qualify you? It's not
That is
stated
correct.
here.
That is actually what is in the ordinance, but it isn't on my slide here, but that is correct. So if you failed a compliance check in the last 5 years, you would also not, for tobacco, you would also not be eligible. That is correct.
And to follow up on that question.
Oh, okay, go ahead, you first.
No, did you have more?
I was just wondering if we had taught, and maybe for discussion, is there an opportunity for someone that has failed a compliance check within the last 5 years to somehow pay another fee, pay it down? Or is that the way we want to go? Is that an option? I know it's not in the current verbiage, but just a thought I had.
I don't know if there's anything that would be wrong with that from a legal standpoint, Jim. I think that would be perfectly fine. And it's something we could certainly look at, yeah.
Counselor Whiting, what are you suggesting? A business does this and then fails?
I wouldn't want to do it within the, I mean, if they had like, we have a 5-year window, but if they had 2 years left of that 5 years and wanted to pay, I'll pick a number, $1,000 a year, to be able to pay that down. I mean, I'm not looking at a cost center here, I'm just looking at a business opportunity. But then the compliance, again, they'd still be
right
up against our compliance rules.
And then what if you failed again? And
then it'd be revoked.
Counselor Jim?
Yeah, I think we'd probably have to implement that a little differently than what you're saying. Like, for example, if you've had a violation, you have to pay a higher licensing fee because you've shown in the past you might need more. So there's a mechanism for getting at it. I'm not exactly sure it's what you were talking about, but
I wanted to open it for discussion.
Yeah, no, Counselor Lehman.
Couple things, Mayor. First, I think if you're going to have 5 years exemption for failing a compliance check, it should be the same for tobacco or alcohol. And I think 5 years is way too much because you're basically putting somebody out of business permanently. So I'm opposed to the 5-year restriction. You can have some kind of restriction. 5 years is just too much. The other thing I wanted to get into is there was a talk by the state medicinal cannabis folks that you had on a slide that were talking about they don't know what's actually in this, could be in it. So the thing I was looking at is, can we require in this proposed ordinance that the seller is responsible for the weights, the contents, the labeling requirements that are laid out in the current state requirement, or is that just automatically an expectation?
I think they are, aren't they, Jim?
yes, there are labeling requirements they have to meet.
Yeah.
So,
That
and,
would be redundant on our behalf.
yeah, did we include, I can't remember, did we include the labeling in the ordinance itself? I have to go back and refresh my memory, I can't remember.
Did we have a what, a labeling?
Labeling.
Labeling requirements.
I
in
don't
the
think we did. I think we just relied upon the state labeling requirements.
I'll take a look.
I like that, but just recently in the paper this week, there was the state is suing a couple manufacturers because you're supposed to have, I can't remember the numbers, like 5 milligrams in a gummy and as a one gummy, and then the whole bottle can't exceed
a certain amount,
50.
yeah.
But they were finding these other bottles, they were suing these couple companies that it was 500 times that amount. Very potent and
I wanna make sure that that responsibility is on them.
The seller.
That it can't be that we didn't do the compliant check on that respect.
No, they are responsible for what they sell.
And we do
Yes.
defer to state statute, but we do specifically call out that statute that requires the labeling requirements.
other discussion, Counselor Brennan.
I would like to know if we can restrict the advertising that's on the, within the building or on the building regarding the sale of the product. Can it be displayed in the window? I would like to see that not displayed on a window.
I don't know off the top of my head. We would have to look at that.
I agree, we'd have to look into
My
that.
only
You're talking about, excuse me, you're talking about the product being visible or signs on the window advertising that they're selling the product?
Right, the signs on the windows and advertising.
Yeah, we would have to look at that.
That would be in our sign ordinance.
My concern is that it's a legal product. I mean, we're kind of going back to the paradigm, you know, and we kind of got to shift away from that if now we're legal, and that's my thoughts on it.
I agree with you. Otherwise, we shouldn't allow alcohol to be in a Budweiser on a sign on a window either. Some kid might see that too, and they're not eligible to purchase it.
All right, more questions of staff? Counselor?
Do you feel like you have enough from us to work with?
Yeah, but I would like to address the 5-year. I mean, what is your general
Let's start
thought?
down here. It's proposed at 5. Do you make a comment on 5 years, Counselor Brennan?
I agree with 5 years.
And you would like less?
I would like less. I think that at the beginning of this, it was pretty confusing for not only all the cities and counties. When the state rolled this out, I'm sure the businesses were equally as confused as everybody else. And I think as we start here, we have to have some leeway. See what happens in 6 months from the state. I'll be very surprised if they actually take action in 6 months, because they don't seem to act that quick on more important items. But once that is done, and if they fix some of their loopholes and stuff, you know, then you can be more restrictive. But then again, it's a legal product, and I'd like to see the compliance check violations treated equally. Alcohol kills many more people than THC if it's controlled. And tobacco certainly kills a lot of people. So I would like to see them equal, and I think 5 years for any of them is way, way beyond what I would support.
Counselor Whiting?
It was just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about tobacco compliance and having an opportunity to put some teeth in our law, if you want to say that. But here's an opportunity that we can say, you could increase your sales, or if you choose to go this route, but since you didn't comply with our rules, it's the carrot and stick, basically. You know, you didn't comply, so now you can't choose to expand your business with this until you are under compliance. I don't have a problem with the 5 years, but I would like to look at having an opportunity to at least buy down the last 2 years, and take maybe that money to fund some of those compliance checks and things like that, so that we aren't continuing to have to fight this battle of trying to keep tobacco, alcohol, and now THC out of the hands of minors. That's all I have.
Thank you. Counselor Contreras?
Thinking seriously here, I feel this would give it more seriousness for these owners to comply and do it. And like Mr. Whiting said, maybe we can give them a clean slate, let them pay it off, or pay off their for failing the first time, and give them a clean slate, but stick to it and just make it more serious, because I mean, we have a list of people who have failed within the last 5 years, and it's unacceptable. There's rules. You have to pay the consequences to your decisions, or your employees' decisions.
All right, and my take on it, I think 5 years is too restrictive as well. I'd like to see that less. I'm not trying to give a break to a violator. Is there a component to buy it down? But then I think if you fail, pay it down, really what we need to talk about is moving forward, right? And what happens in the next bunch of years. We have, that's what okay, I'll throw money at it to get back in business, and then a year or two later, they fail again, and then what do we do? As we've seen here, the liquor and the tobacco, obviously there's some disconnect. But about the years, I think there's more consensus for 5 years. But maybe with some ability to get back in the game. I don't know what that would look like. Counselor Lehman?
I'm not familiar with the technology or if it's used or what it cost. So I'm curious because the ultimate goal is to make it so that it doesn't happen.
Right.
So they've got these card readers where you take the ID and you can scan it, or sometimes that doesn't work, but maybe one of the options is this dollar amount, or this has to be in place as part of that buy down, because then you're making an effort to actually put something in place that might actually
The machines?
lower the,
A plan, a new plan for not,
well,
for compliance plan, basically.
if you were a checkout person at a facility that was selling one of these products with restrictions, and you've got a line backed up and you're under all this pressure and you're reading and you're making mistakes and not counting in your head or whatever, the easier way is to swipe it, and it tells you green or red. And if it doesn't work, at that point, you have to go and do your math.
Yeah, we heard from a violator here a couple months ago that
Yep.
they said they have a reader, and the person came in, and I don't know, I can't quite remember, but I believe the cashier used their license
Yeah,
to scan to get in, to have I remember 10 years ago, I remember the discussion back a long, long time ago that was, at the time, the readers were really expensive. We didn't want to force that on those
Right.
businesses. It's just up to them.
But now we're punishing the business for the actions of an employee who knowingly and
Well,
willingly.
I'll stand tall. The employee is an employee. The owner of the business owns these licenses and is responsible for adhering to all the rules that come with what I deem as a valuable license. Alcohol, cigarettes, these are valuable licenses. We just don't hand them out. And you're in control of your own business. Everyone that's failed, that employee no longer works here, and we've heard those stories
But
before.
how do you justify restricting somebody for 5 years for selling this legal product to a minor, but not restricting that business for selling this restricted product to a minor? I mean, you're picking out one single legal product to target with a much more steeper penalty than the other two. And that's where I don't see the equity in that.
Well, and I agree with you, Counselor Lehman, but I'm trying to build consensus here so we can give staff good direction, and, I think 3 of us here at this board think that 5 is fine, and that kind of rules me and you out at this juncture.
And I checked with Chief Tate. Most of the businesses do have those readers now.
Right.
So they're already in place in most places.
And then we have so if you, about some of these businesses that failed, that are already selling, wondering what the further, a couple of these on here don't even sell cigarettes, we're tying this to the cigarette ordinance, right?
We are, and, we do have businesses currently selling. We have businesses currently selling in violation of state law. We have that documented, and they've been notified. I think the letters went out today? Yesterday?
Okay. I also have a issue with the fee schedule for this at $200. I'm not here to make a huge license fee again, but, you know, $200, these are valuable licenses. Those companies are in business to sell those products, and I've been in a liquor store, I've been in a cigarette store, they're selling a lot of those widgets. And I think comes with a lot of responsibility, and I think the fee for that should be higher, and we should look at that, maybe not today, but look at the overall fee structure.
Yeah, I think that's important, Mr. Mayor. As I was looking at all the different fees and then looking how convoluted our liquor fees are, we do. They need to be simple, they need to be understandable, and they probably need to be adjusted. I don't know when the last time the fees were adjusted for alcohol and tobacco, but I suspect it's been a very, very long time, and we'll find that out.
All right,
I would
Counselor.
support that.
If we're not gonna take action today, we wanna make sure that staff has enough direction. I think we built consensus on the 5 years. There's interest in a buy down or get out of jail card or whatever you think.
Yeah, we can look at some
There's
language.
an idea of looking at the fee, which might be part of this, but also when we had our compliance failures, we were gonna be looking at the teeth. There was an article in the paper. I know we're not alone, but we gotta stop the failures, and if, with those folks with the valuable licenses, those are the owners, and I think we gotta look at that as we discussed a couple weeks ago.
And the game plan, frankly, was to bring that forward on the 20th and essentially have that pegged up to a little more than what inflation would have been.
Right.
So they were put in place, I believe, in 2002, so we would bring them up to a little higher than inflation for 2023.
More, Counselor
Did
White.
we need consensus on the current violators that the county pointed out to us? Did we want to keep that language? I support the language as it is, since they're in violation now, that they'd be out 5 years. I just didn't know if we had consensus.
I'm reading these last two lines on this. It has a failed compliance check or inspection. Is that just for THC on the line above the last line? Is that
No, that's for...
tobacco, liquor,
that's
all inclusive?
That's for all compliance checks, correct.
And then you have the bottom line that says THC imposed for 5 years. I guess, I think we've discussed that there's consensus here of 3-2 that folks want to stay at 5 years.
I'm good?
Well, actually, there was a talk about some buy down.
Yep.
And we'll
Counselor
draft some language to
floated
take a
an
look at
idea,
that.
but the city attorney said that we're gonna craft something else.
Yeah, I think we understand the
Yeah.
concept. And
Yeah.
we'll come back to you with what I
Right.
think are workable options.
So then we're not gonna take any action tonight. This will be back at our next meeting on the 20th, and some updates will be made. All right. Let's move ahead then to 11A2, which is the implementation of the 2022 compensation program. And Bill will, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So again, I'd like to give a little history of this. This is a very convoluted and in-depth subject. And so I want to try to make it as easy to understand for people at home and others. You know, we have all of the back data for all of these discussions. What essentially I've provided is the overviews and the initial Keystone Group report. So to go back in time, in 2017, we had contracted with Keystone for a compensation and classification study, and that was for full-time non-union positions. And that really, at that point, focused more on the classification aspect. In other words, we are looking at the particular jobs making sure the job descriptions were accurate, and then they were pegged to the compensation plan itself. You know, we obviously had several purposes, making sure that our compensation was market competitive. We wanted an independent evaluation of our classification structure to ensure it was fair and equitable. And we frankly wanted to make sure that it was transparent. Our old system really wasn't as transparent as what we had once we instilled this particular process. That study, which we contracted in 2017, wasn't delivered until 2018, focused on updating, and council took action on it in 2018, focused on updating and scoring all job descriptions and pointed on the wage scale. You then did a similar part-time study, which was approved by council in 2022, earlier this year. And then obviously, this process really normally is in place every 3 years when we look at our union negotiations, and specifically was in this last bargaining period because we had just got done with the 2017 study and we knew we had to incorporate something similar for our union partners. And so we have what I call the Goldilocks rule. It's not too wet, or it's not too warm, and it's not too cold. Essentially, council's been very good about saying, you want us to be at the midpoint. You don't want us to be at the high of our comparable cities. You don't want us to be at our low. You want us to be at the midpoint. And so it's important to understand that whenever from now on, when I'm talking about the 100% mark, the study then took that midpoint. And so everything we're talking about is working towards the midpoint. So the midpoint of our comparable cities is 100% for the study. This study really focused not so much on the classification, which is the last study, but we also, this really needed to look at our compensation itself for our market comparables. We did not think there was a need to rebuild the job descriptions. We did understand that there might be some minor tweaks of descriptions if we found them to be necessary, but that really wasn't the purpose of this study. Please go back, Michael, I'm sorry. It primarily focused on market comparisons, not, once again, where the job was on the particular scale. All right, thank you, Michael. Some good things. The average ratio of pay came in at 96.5%, which essentially means, as you know, we have a 7-point scale. For every year that someone is employed, they rise up until that 7th year. And so what that essentially tells us that employees tend to stay, 96.5%, tend to stay with the city within at least a 7-year period. That's a good thing. The pay itself was within the market median, 98.6, meaning that once again it was at 98.6 of our market comparables, that middle place. The one issue that one of two issues was that the maximum pay itself was below the midpoint at 95%, which, although not necessarily in and of itself does that look like it's something that needs to be addressed, the problem is the compounding effect that not addressing it now will have into the future. In other words, if we don't do it now, we're going to have to pay more to do it later. We also initially found that we had 16 positions that were possibly out of the market comparison by quite a range, and if you'll remember, I had informed all of you what those positions initially were, and that we were going to take a closer look because I wanted to be sure that what we were doing was correct. And frankly, to be very upfront, because I wanted to make sure that people didn't think we were being biased in what we were doing. So ultimately, what we decided to do was to take a look at all positions, non-union, full-time positions in the city, every one of them. This extended our study even further. And that's exactly what staff did. They reevaluated and repointed all non-union full-time positions. They compared them then to comparable city job descriptions because we found that just because two jobs had the same title, because of the way a city was organized or their duties were broken out, oftentimes those titles did not compare in actuality to being similar jobs. So we had to dive even deeper in those particular cases to make sure that we were actually doing comparable jobs to comparable jobs, regardless of titles, and we did that as well. Once we went through all of that work, we then verified that we had 11 positions that were out of market after making all of those comparisons. Those positions are as follows: the police chief, the code compliance specialist, the recreation aquatic specialist, 3 facility maintenance workers, all in that same job position, the fire chief, the finance accounting specialist, the city clerk, the deputy city clerk, the IT director, the communications director, and the human resources director. So after about 6 to 7 to 8 months, those were the ones that we identified. So what are the ultimate recommendations that we're coming to? First of all, we're looking to have a 2% market rate adjustment, which when coupled with our 2.5 COLA that we're going to have in 2023, will bring us to 99.5% of that 100% midpoint. So granted, it's not 100%, but we're at a much more manageable 99.5%. And then obviously, I'm asking to make individual grade adjustments for those 11 positions as they're outlined in the memo. So, financial impact. So all of this has been budgeted in our 2023 budget because we knew as we were building the budget that we had this coming up. We initially didn't know how much it was going to cost, but it is below what we had initially assumed. So that 2% MRA is $223,000, and then the 11 position with grade changes is $52,000 and change, which brings the total budgetary impact to $275,000, and once again, which gets us to that 99.5% to that midpoint. Chelsea worked very hard on this, as did Nate and others. I'm certain if I don't know the answer to something that they can certainly, they were doing all the digging and we're in the midst of the details. So with that being said, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, and just before we talk and have discussion, I know you've worked on this for a long time, and it's been a long time coming here to this point, so thank you for you and staff working hard on this, and it looks like a lot of analysis went into this. But questions of staff? Councilor Lehman.
The question I have is, do we still have the Me Too clawback clause in 3 union?
Yeah, we have some union contracts, but that clawback clause is specifically for other unions.
Okay. So by doing this, we're not hamstringing our negotiations?
I don't think so, but I'll be very upfront with you. I think these negotiations are going to be different than what we've done in the past. We've got some real stressors on our union members. I think that I do think that there will be a commiserate, if that's a word, look at what we ultimately come up with our union members.
Nate?
I just want to make a quick comment on the Me Too clause too. So you typically will see that with things like insurance and the cost of living adjustment. These are market adjustments, so we're looking at the market and adjusting for market.
That's a good point.
Similar to what we did with the union contracts, where each of them had a piece of a market adjustment in it, a little bit different form than this, but they also had that piece which isn't necessarily fall into that Me Too clause.
To me, that was a great question, and I asked that of staff the other day. I think, to me, the Me Too is the COLA and other things, but we did a market adjustment a couple years ago that included some of our union folks as well, so.
Yeah, we really did. Our police officers had a very in-depth analysis, literally person by person, and age groups and everything else was broken down, so.
Okay. More?
No.
I guess I have a couple here. So it's 2% market adjustment, and then the 2.5 that everybody else would get if we approved our budget, right?
Yeah, so the 2.5 that we originally had budgeted
Goes to
was
all.
the COLA.
Okay,
Yep.
goes to all.
Yep.
All right, and then, the market changes all the time, and we study this, and and make adjustments. I think this is the third one in the last 7 years, but are we adjusting the pay, or are we adjusting the steps?
Well, that's a good question. We're actually doing both.
Right.
Okay,
The 11 positions will be the steps, and the 2%
Yep.
is the pay.
and so pay 2% including steps. And that's part of the 2%? Say that again.
No, that is not part of the
The 11
2%.
identified positions
Yeah.
will have step changes to the tune of 52,410.
Okay,
And all positions will see a 2% MRA adjustment.
Correct.
okay, all right, I'm.
So we're going in and doctoring up the 11 positions to fix their pay scale.
Right,
And then everyone else, and them included, will get a 2% market rate adjustment overall, which then, so those are outliers that we got to fix. And then when we fix them, then we can bring everybody up to that 99.5%.
right, which is just short of the 50% of our comparable cities.
Correct.
Right. And then my further question, because we've done this, I think, 3 times in 7 years, you know, what does this look like in 3 or 4 more years? Are we gonna have to do it all over again?
Well, I think it's important that every 5 years or so that we do a market rate
Right.
analysis and comparison. And I've always, you know, when we talk internally to staff, said that that's something I believe is important. But ultimately, we didn't have to do this study.
Right, no, I know.
You know, but in this particular environment, I think it took on even more meaning, which is why we really wanted to make sure that what we brought forward was going to have the result that we wanted. In other words, that will hopefully impact those particular positions and will encourage our employees to stay and be a part of this organization.
Okay. Counselor Lehman?
The other thing that I was, for future anyway, is that I was thinking about is, if you take a city of Shakopee, 50,000, or you take a city 50,000 that's right next door or a offshoot of Minneapolis or St. Paul, yeah, we're the same size, yeah, we might be using them as a comparison, but they're really not comparable because, you know, it's a different climate, I guess. It's not the same climate type job than it would be in an outlying area.
Yeah, I think there's some validity to that. I will say that what we've done is that we're not just focusing on population when it comes to our comparable cities. We've got a host of different things that we're looking at
Criteria.
to try to prevent exactly what you're talking about. But we know even, you know, I always like talking about our friends in Prior Lake because we are right next to each other, but we could not be more different.
Right.
I mean, you know, we are totally different communities. And so even though, you know, you would think that they'd kind of be in our ballpark, I mean, for example, they get over $2 million in fiscal disparities. You know, they have, I don't know, 60 lift stations. I think we're going to have 3. You know, and there's just a host of different things that, you know, they're more residential. We're clearly not.
Right.
There are a lot of things that separate us even though we're next door. So, and we're continuing to look at the process that we use to determine comparable cities because we want to find those that we can benchmark ourselves, not just in union negotiations and not just in this kind of stuff, but other, you know, things to determine whether or not we're being successful.
Right. Okay. Other questions, comments? I think this is a great study. I think we're trying to get some fairness and transparency and, but being in a company that too as well, that, you know, if you get a raise and I don't, and I could say, well, I was out of whack and you're not, and what about me too? And so, I'm always cautious about, I hope that our beloved staff understands that it's trying to create fairness for all, fairness and equal, and, so, but Counselor Whiting?
Thank you. To one of your points, we did do this a few years ago. You said 2017. I think,
2017,
right? And I think 5 years is probably stretching it out a little bit, but it's important to stay on top of that and make sure our employees are taken care of. We want to retain the best and brightest employees and have that work environment that people are getting fair market value for what they're putting in. And of course, all the job market stressors that are out there. It's hard to fill some of these positions if somebody leaves too. We know the inflation pressures that folks are under when they have to go to the grocery store, and those are our employees too. So, so with that, I'd make a motion to adopt Resolution R 2022-147, approving the 2022 compensation program study and implementing a 2% market rate adjustment for all non-union full-time employees and approval of an additional market rate adjustment for the listed positions.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion, Counselor Lehman?
Does this resolution have the updated positions? It says 16 and the slide says 11.
Yeah, it does. I believe, let me make sure. I'm pretty sure, yeah, because it's the one that's in the memo, so yes, that is correct.
All right. Further discussion? 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 All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries. Thank you all. Let's move ahead then to 11A3, which is our parenting and paid paternal leave policy. And Mr. Reynolds, welcome back.
Well, thanks, Mayor Mars and members of council. Once again, this is something we've talked about before. We talked about it in February of 2019 during our strategic planning session. We brought that back. We did some in-depth discussion on the issue led by Mr. Burkett, and then we didn't do anything with it. At this point, I am bringing it back because I do think that a lot of things have changed since then. We've had COVID. We've had a recognition that our employee base is shrinking and tightening, and this is something for a very low, for a very low price at the end of the day, gives value added to our employees. And so I am looking at, and once again, we went out to our comparable cities. We went out to other cities in the metro. Scott County also offers, Scott County only offers a week. But I'm recommending, based upon what we were able to discover, the average was about 3.5 weeks. And so I'm requesting that we have 3 weeks paid parental leave for whether that's birth or adoption of children. And I have to be upfront and say that I fully expect that the state will come through in this session and probably will have a mandatory 12-week. That seems to be, and with the political layout of our current state house, I would say that, and with the governor, I would say that it's a pretty sure bet that that's going to happen anyway. But I think it's important that we put our flag in the sand on this issue and make sure our people are taken care of in the interim.
Yep. Questions of staff? Questions of staff? The added benefits is I've seen in the last several years are, the added benefits are going up, and I see that, obviously not everybody's going to take at this, and it is a low-cost thing, and I agree with you, Mr. Reynolds, that this will become a state mandate eventually, and probably longer than we're looking at.
Unfunded mandate, right?
I thought I was going to use that word, but I chose not to, but I appreciate that added verbiage.
I'll be using it often.
Surplus, though.
You're right. But it is the way of the world, and if we want to attract and retain staff, absolutely. So those are my comments for that. Counselor Contreras, please.
Sorry, not at 100 tonight, but we're working on this here. I'd just like to make a motion to adopt resolution R 2022-148, approving the city of Shakopee's parenting and paid parent, can't even say that right. I know, parental leaving policy, sorry. Yes.
I'll second.
I have a motion, a second from Counselor Brennan. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much. All right. Let's move ahead then to item 11A4, which is filling council vacancy for Counselor Lehman's seat prior to the required special election. And Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just simply put on the agenda to give staff, if we need to, the ability to, first of all, I should say that there really are very little to no rules about how you fill a position until the special election. And the only reason that, talking with the city attorney, we wanted this on the agenda was to start that discussion about the process. In other words, you could come in on January and say, this is who we want, we're good, excellent, no problem. Staff doesn't have to do anything. But if you are looking for any type of a process that you need us to do homework on or get moving or anything else, we need to obviously make sure that we have the time to get that done. So, Jim, I don't know if you have anything else to add. Essentially, we're just looking for some direction on.
Yeah, just so I think everyone's clear on this, but what the state law says in this situation is if there's more than 2 years left on the balance, in this case of Councilmember Lehman's term, which there will be, because he'll be sworn in presumably on that first Tuesday in January, and his current term expires, and that's January 3rd. His current term expires on the first Monday in 2025, so there's like 368 days left on his term, so therefore the state law requires a special election. Regardless of whether a special election though is or isn't required, you still need to appoint someone. So if there was no special election, you would appoint the person for the balance of the term if there was less than 2 years, but because there's more than 2 years, we need to hold a special election, which there are a lot of rules on that we have to follow on the election. But the process for making an appointment is completely discretionary with the city council as to how you want to go about doing that.
Well, good. You know, I think there will be an open seat. It's more than 2 years. I know that we need a special election, and for our community, you know, good governance in our thing, and I'd like to see. I think there was a previous date in February, but we couldn't make that date. The next available one is April 11th, but that would be the date of the election, but staff has to get, I think there has to be 40-some days of open voting.
And to be clear, this discussion itself isn't about the special election.
Okay.
We will have that later. This is specifically about how council wants to fill the seat, and what process you want to be used. So if we need to do something from a staff perspective to assist that, then we are prepared to do so. As opposed to, I'm sorry, Jim.
No, go ahead. No, and I think everybody's clear on this, but so the appointment we're talking about is an appointment, assuming the special election is going to be in April, and state law now governs when you can hold special elections. Right. So the appointment we're talking about, number one, can't be made until after the first of the year when the vacancy occurs, but it's an appointment from whenever you make the appointment until whenever that person who's elected in April gets sworn into office. So we're talking, depending on when you make it, 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
Appointment is what we're talking about.
Councilor Lehman, Mayor-elect.
Yes.
Comment, discussion on this matter?
Well, I think the next council will have this discussion on January 3rd, is it? calendar. I don't have a current calendar.
At the
So
first meeting in January?
First meeting in January, and to figure out exactly how we wanna go about the special election.
Would you would?
Well, no, that's exactly right, but this is not about the special
I
election.
mean, I'm sorry, the appointment. And they'll probably at the same time, you know, April 11th that's the date, that's fine.
I guess the question is, would we want to do an interview process? Would we want to just come with some names to put in the hat, throw in the ring here? Do we want to clear anybody, ask for volunteers?
It's gonna be a good discussion. From my perspective.
I mean, I think staff should have some time to look at that.
I think it's important to be prepared to, and, you know, I understand that there's not my administration, I get that, with full respect, but I think that in the first meeting in January, you should be able to hit the ground running, to be prepared to make an appointment, because I just don't see us, I think it would be an injustice to our community to go from January to April without an appointment, so that, you know, we can have a balance of government here on the council side.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. I don't think we're gonna go from till April without an appointment. At least it's not my intention. But realistically, the conversation should include Council-elect Delaney in the discussion, along with the rest of the council. And there's where we're gonna try to build consensus on what that process is and should be. And do we rule some things out, rule other things in? That's a group decision to be made by that future council. And I'm sure we're gonna be able to come to a consensus, or at least a majority, of how to move that process.
Do you envision having a person appointed by the second meeting of January?
Very possible.
I mean, I just speak for the betterment of our community and this DIAS of having, you know, there's a reason board of directors and councils are an odd number, right?
Exactly, yeah, absolutely.
And so there's value in that.
And how many meetings have we had in the last 4 years with somebody missing? I know I've missed a few with eye surgeries. I know that each one of us has been out with the flu or whatever. I know COVID split us up quite a bit. So it's not like we're not gonna be able to function. We're gonna get through it. We're gonna be able to come together and come up with a plan on January 3rd, and we're gonna make it happen relatively quickly, because it is in their best interest.
Counselor Whiting?
It's my intention on January 3rd to have a candidate to nominate, and we'll see where that goes.
Counselor Contreras?
I will too.
Okay.
Just from a staff perspective, I just want to make sure that we're ready for whatever the council needs. And that's
Right.
the only reason we're discussing
And
this.
it's pretty hard from this position to say, gee, let's do this, because this is, A, I don't have the authority to decide that. B, this is not the council that should be making that decision. So,
Everybody's got one vote, though. We're all equal. There isn't any special real powers as mayor, as you well know.
correct. So
We're just trying to set the city up for success regardless of who's in charge.
I think the proper role is for the 4 that are gonna be at this DIASC on January 3rd to have that discussion, see how we wanna move forward. If people wanna nominate somebody and see if it passes right off Jump Street, so be it. You know, I think the better approach would be to have the discussion to see how we do it together. But that's just one person, so we'll see what happens.
I don't know if we offered enough direction, but
No, that's fine. Just so everybody's clear. We're not going to be doing anything in regards to that process.
Right.
And so,
well, I think
which is
that-
fine.
I think,
It's just that we wanted to make sure that we weren't
Right.
caught flat-footed if suddenly
Right.
you guys wanted something
and
different.
I think that's what we're trying to get at. You're a process guy.
Yep.
You're gonna start in January. I think that there's gonna be a empty seat. We value the process, and we'd like to know the process and try to see where we go to create that continuing governance and continuity, so. Okay. All right, there's enough of that. Let's move forward then to 11B1, which is a review of concept for Huber Park Playground equipment. Michael will present. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So, per the CIP and discussion over the past several years, Huber Playground has reached its useful life, and so we did reach out to our several consultants and came back with 3 proposals for you to look at tonight. These were also reviewed by the Parks, Recreation, and Advisory Board. So the first, all of these stay within the general containment area of the existing Huber Park. Items that we had a pretty extensive outreach program for about a year. So some of the items that people really wanted were a zip line. So you can see that's here. This item, which I'm not sure what you call, it's sort of like the old monkey bars, except way more sophisticated. It's back here. And people also asked for as much as possible for the site to be accessible. So this is the first proposal, we'll call number 1. So over here you can see this is the zip line function. It's got a climbing structure here. You'll notice there's also a significant amount of port in place. This is both for safety and for accessibility. This is the climbing structure.
This, Michael, the surface that you're showing here in these slides are very similar to what we have all over with the all-inclusive?
Mayor and Council, that's correct. So most of our new parks, we've been using port in place for access because of the large area here, and this is also a pretty heavily used park. There's more port in place than you typically would see.
Okay.
And this is actually one of the pieces that was installed in another park, just to give you an idea of scale and size.
You know
And this
how hot those slides get during the summer?
I'm sure they do.
You lived through it.
This is one, this has the structured mulch. Our consultant's suggesting, as you can see on this, that we not go with that we go with port in place for safety. And again, you can see here, here's the zip line in the background here, some swing features, and again, here's the larger piece for the older children, and then there's a smaller play area here for the younger children. This is number 2, which has some swings over in this corner here. And again, another zip line, different style structure with a slide, and another smaller structure for children. And then what I used to call a teeter-totter, but it has a much more sophisticated name over in the corner. So this is the climbing structure, again, with a significant amount of port in place. This is the smaller children piece, again, the zip line. Here's a picture of what that actually looks like in real life. This is kind of the layout. So this again would be the structured mulch area, and this is the large port in place area. And this is number 3, so a little bit more. This is a different company. This is, the first 2 were Berliner. This is a company called Berkey. So again, a pretty large play structure, again, a zip line, and then a swing set over here, and a couple of other accessible areas. So this is what that would look like. So here's their version kind of that play structure, a smaller structure for the younger children. This is, remember, this is kind of the old spinner over here.
Councilor Lehman?
Is the green that I'm seeing grass or fake turf? Dark green is fake stuff, and then the grass is the lighter
Yes.
stuff?
Correct.
Okay.
And again, on this one, next slide, you can see here's the swing set over here, the larger play piece, and then some smaller play pieces. And here's a picture of what it really looks like when it's built. And Councilmember Lehman, I believe this is grass, this area out here. The darker green and blue is that Porton Place. So this says more Porton Place.
And then, Mayor, I have another question.
Yeah.
Do we know which between the three is least susceptible to painted vandalism or easiest to clean? And do we have prices on each three?
Mayor and council, these are all in the $700,000 range, including the demolition and the Porton Place. Porton Place right now is running $45 to $50 a square foot. It's a very expensive material. Vandalism, graffiti, it's a national problem. They have been, let's see, working on some of these pieces, some coating, but the biggest issue we have are the Sharpie markers that kids use. It's hard to get that off. The public works crews have been doing their best to try and keep these clean, but kids are gonna do what they're gonna do. I mean, there's nothing that's not,
Right.
that's graffiti proof. They're resistant, I'll say. The Parks and Rec Advisory Board, I think, had a preference for either this number 1 or the number 3. And again, they're all about the same price. We will get a final price once we get some feedback tonight, and these are on the state contract, so there'll be some discounts.
Can we see 1 and 3?
Huh?
Can we see 1 and 3 again?
Yep,
1 and 3 again?
This is 1. This is 3.
Counselor Contreras?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in my opinion, I'm more interested in number 3, just because of the slides. Those are hot, very hot slides, and I think this plastic would be a little less hotter. I mean, I'm thinking, and it's just, I feel that this concept has way more things for the kids to do for some reason. So for me, would be number 3.
Okay.
Counselor Brennan?
I think, I like number 1. I think number 3 is really similar to Scenic Heights, and has the same components in it with the zip line and the climbing slide area. I think this one is a little bit more unique with the tower, but I also don't like the metal slide. So I don't know if there's any switching out of those.
Mayor and Council, we can get with the manufacturer's rep and find out. They've installed these in Arizona and some hotter climates, of what they're doing with the slides. I believe, because it's covered in here, this tends to be the cooler spot, and you're correct, this is probably the warmer spot down here.
Counselor Whiting?
I agree. I like the uniqueness of 1. It looks like it'd be higher maintenance to me. I'm only speculating here, but my preference would be for 3. It may be similar to other ones. And I guess, is there any way to kind of orient, give us an idea how these would orient towards the river, I guess? I see, okay, you got the old park in there.
I think it's the same orientation as the current playground.
Yep, the Mayor and
So
Council, that's correct.
the river would be up where the wording is.
I will say the playground number 1, the Berliner stuff, is because that's a bridge and steel company, they tend to be pretty heavy duty as far as maintenance
You're
goes.
talking about 1?
Yep.
Okay.
That's a German company. They're known for the kind of, there's a couple of these in the Twin Cities already, and they hold up pretty well, particularly in our climate, because they're made out of bridge material.
Counselor Lehman?
I think number 1 is, I think that number 1 and 3 are deceiving. I think number 1, the pieces we're looking at look like they're consolidated, or do I have this backward? Maybe it's 3. 3 looks like everything's together and you're getting less in consolidation.
Same footprint.
It is, so it's kind of deceiving. When you look at number 1, you're looking at the 1 tower with the house thing up top, but there's so many other components that you've got to see also and they're all spread out, so you're not seeing them in one slide, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But I tend to go to 3, too. I think it just looks a lot better.
Yeah, number 3, the only thing that they told us to caution is it is plastic, and we have had a lot of fading on the ones that we've installed from Berkey in the past.
So I'm easy. I can go either one, actually. They both have some pretty cool stuff. I agree with the metal slide thing. Hot.
We can look into that and come back to you when we'll ask the supplier, and we'll ask them again about fading on number 3.
And then the other question I had is on number 1, it shows all the wood shavings, and you said we wouldn't be doing that, so how would that be addressed?
We would be doing wood shavings on number 1 in the areas that you see in the rendering. So let's go back to the port in place is largely around the large climbing structure.
Okay.
So if you look in this picture, so when you're on the zip line, you get on it over here. When you get off, you're in the wood shaving area, because when you hit the zip line, he said in this material, it can be a little painful.
All right.
Mayor,
Other comments?
just
Counselor Contreras?
thank you. Just as a mom, the sweaters I've thrown away because of the chips that get stuck in like cotton, the inside. I mean, that's not very nice. I've had brand new sweaters go to the trash because I can't pick out all those chips, those pieces of wood.
Wood fiber, yeah.
No, not nice.
Just tell your kids.
Well, my comments on this are, I have some attachment here to the old playground, and I do know that I always viewed there would be a time that would come that the old community-built playground would see its, would look for a new future. And I think what I really, almost 20 years of that playground, 2005, is that it's a destination park playground. I mean, people go there all the time, even during the winter. And if this is gonna be our riverfront, I still think, and as it was back in 2005, to be a significant playground because of the draw. And we're gonna only enhance that with the culture corridor and the Schroeder House and et cetera. And I like number 3. I like the zip line. I like the what appears to be more of a sizable structure. This is not a neighborhood park. This is a community focal point playground. So I like number 3. I like it. You're removing the barriers. The playground that the community built back then had a fence around it. That was kind of the part of some safety. This openness appeals to me in today's world,
So Mayor and Council, there will be, it's not shown here because it's not in this part of the contract, there will be a fence on any of these designs towards the riverside. That was one of the comments that came from parents. They don't want their children running kind of down that hill.
right. The pond on the north side.
Yep.
Okay, I get that part. Further comments to staff, and you're just looking for more direction, right?
Yes, sir.
You have enough?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, or Counselor White?
I will say, that was your baby. You led that, you built that before it was even Huber, well, it was Huber Park, but before it was the Huber Park we all know of today. So it must be hard. Maybe we can save those slats. You want to save
Well,
them?
there should be a little discussion. I don't know how we would go about it, but we did sell the pickets. I don't know, there's probably 100 of them or so, maybe a little over 100, and they're screwed in, and maybe there would be a way to get those back. And then my wife and I were talking about how we would ever try to locate there's some easy people. I have one, and but trying to find other folks that, but try to do that. It's like the old brick thing.
Yeah, I think they said when we get the bricks, hey, here's your bricks. If you want them, you got 2 weeks to
Right.
come and get them.
So,
Yeah.
we should find a way to do that. Further comment, discussion? Enough direction? Thank you very much. All right. Let's move ahead then. We are at 12A, the city bill list is before us. Any comment, questions on our bill list? Seeing none, we would move ahead to 12B, our liaison administration report, and we'll start down here. Counselor Contreras.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have one tonight.
That's fine. Counselor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Talking about the MVTA meeting from last week. A couple of the things we talked about, we're still not at pre-pandemic numbers for ridership, but there's a projection that by 2025 we should be back at those numbers. And since the pandemic, there's been kind of a shift in of course, MVTA was focused on that direct service, let's say Shakopee to downtown. Post-pandemic, now it's more of that on-demand service, so here to there, and some of those weekend services like those events and things. So dynamics have changed, so some of the funding has changed to focus on that. You know, maybe we'll be getting back to that express service in the future, but right now it's on to that on-demand service. Also, MVTA is sponsoring the 2022 Stuff the Bus. The bus will be at, let's see, Shakopee Hy-Vee on December 10th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And we're stuffing the bus for the CAP agency and other community food shelves in Scott and Dakota counties. So also Cub Foods, December 11th. So Hy-Vee on the 10th, Cub on the 11th. Again, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Help stuff the bus with non-perishable food items. Those food shelves have been hit pretty hard these days. So that's all I have.
Counselor Whiting, thank you very much. Counselor Lehman?
Mine are Friday, so I don't have a report.
Okay. Counselor Brennan?
The SPU meeting was last night. We approved the budget for 2023 and the CIP. And also, based on the rate study that was completed last year, the increase in the water and electric is 4%. We went in closed session to discuss the possible sites for the electric substation on the east side and the water treatment plant. The next CUP meeting is canceled, tentatively, probably. And that would have been on December 19th. So last night was my final meeting on the SPU. So it was a great opportunity. I had thanked the commission and really the professionalism of the staff at the SPU for the work that's been done in the last couple of years to change the direction of that organization. And it was a pleasure to really work with those people.
Good.
I'd like to thank you for serving on SPUC for us. It really helped us get a better handle on where SPUC was with having you there, and helped SPUC, I think, as well.
Thank you. You know, we had a discussion about, you know, what the future of my position what they would like, and they all agree that it was really important to that organization to have a voting member from the city council sitting on the SPU commission. They felt that was important for communication, and they felt that was just important to be involved in the development of the organization, and so that's what they would like to see going forward. Because I think they really value what this relationship has become.
Okay. Speaking of that, I guess on my mayor's report, I'll try to preempt that a little bit. I know that when we were discussing appointment and special elections on an item here earlier, I was remiss in not bringing up SPUC, but I think we have had tremendous value in having a sitting council member be a voting board member, moving away from that simple liaison. I thought we got more value, more connected, and I'd like to see that continue, not up to me. But also, I want to make aware, Council Councilperson Lehman that, and Mayor-elect, that as we talk about appointment to the city council and the special election, with Jody's last meeting, and usually you'll make your liaison appointments in January, February for a typical cycle that begins in March and then in April for SPUC. But let's not forget that that SPUC board will be short. And so, strong consideration to get that appointment in early January so that their board can be balanced as well.
And I'm glad we're having this discussion because I was under the understanding that Jody would be there until March. That's the last conversation that we had as a body, and now I learned that's not the case.
I don't think, I know it was discussed once or twice.
Right.
I don't know if we ever decided, but certainly it would be up to this,
When we had.
could be up to this board right now.
When we had that conversation, I recall the last thing I said to Jody at this DIASC was, is that acceptable with the county? And, you know, that was the last comment. So I don't know if it is acceptable or not, but now I'm updated, I guess. And
So,
Well, I would be representing as a member of the community at that point, and not as a county commissioner. You know, you know, it's a unique position. I don't know, it's up to you. I can do it, but it's up to you. You all.
so Mayor-elect, would you like to have this discussion right now?
I was under the assumption that she was staying there until March. That's what the last I understood.
I could see that as an issue.
I don't know what the impact would be on the position being filled by a city council person, though. That's the requirement for the position. That's the only issue. Jim?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood that last point.
Yeah, so the position as it stands now is for a city council person.
Yeah, okay, here's my understanding. Council Brennan was appointed to SPUC as a council member, but she's still on SPUC. She may not become a council member anymore, but she's still on SPUC. So, but there's another issue, which is this, and this is something Commissioner Brennan will have to check with the I don't know if the county considers being on the county board and SPUC incompatible with each other, and therefore they can't hold the same position.
Got it.
It's clearly not incompatible as a council member because we have a statute that says we can do it. But I don't know the answer to the question of whether the county or the county attorney feel that being a county commissioner is incompatible with being on SPUC, and I'm not the one to answer that question. So that could be incompatible.
I'll just update my spreadsheet that I was working on at home and fill that.
Our current
Counselor White.
contract with SPUC says a city council representative may sit as one of the representatives. So as soon as she's not a city council representative, kind of against our contract that we have. And not that you wouldn't give us the excellent service, but
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. I mean, that's the direction where I was going with. You know, I think it's really important for a city council person to be on SPUC, and my term's up on December 31st.
And my point is, I agree that I think we get more bang for our buck having a council member be a voting member of the board rather than a liaison, my opinion. Usually the appointments to boards and commissions start you make them in January, February for March for, you do the interview process and then the subcommittee comes back. And those appointments are teed up for usually March. But SPUC's off a month on their normal rotation, and it's kind of mute at this point. My point to Mayor-elect Lehman would be to balance that board if it can't be Jody and there's a conflict of interest or whatever they're going to call it, compatibility, that you move much more swiftly in early January.
And that's fine. I've been working on on some of that already, and I was under the understanding the last time we discussed it that she would be there till February, or March.
Yeah.
And I'll just modify it,
Okay.
that's fine.
Is there, the compatibility, is that an issue for the city, or is it more of an issue for the county?
It's for the county.
In this case, it's just the
Okay.
county because you have a state law that says you can be both a council member and.
Right.
And I don't know what the county, I do think the safest approach would be to
Would it be helpful?
appoint another council member as soon as possible to fill Councilor Brennan's vacancy on Spark. I think that's the safest course of action to take, just so there's no question.
Enough on this? All right, mayor's report. Went to the regional meeting with the League of Minnesota Cities in Jordan. They have these regional, I guess I don't know, maybe that's not the right word, but small group. They were here 2 or 3 years ago, here in the city hall, and they went to Jordan, so I attended that with Councilor Contreras and Bill Reynolds. Attended Winterfest on Saturday. Great crowd. We have a tremendous community. Yes, indeed, it was cold, but boy, it's a good-looking tree we have that's lit up now, and Santa. Santa's always very popular. Also tonight, I attended and learned more about the Stagecoach Road upgrade. That'll be coming to this council in January or February, so that's my mayor's report. And next up, we would have our administration report. Mr. Reynolds.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Other business. Any other business before this council tonight? Other business? Seeing none, Counselor Whiting?
Make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, December 20th at 7 p.m.
I have a motion to adjourn in a second. Happy holidays to all. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:18.